I never expected my name to be missing from my father's obituary, but there it was, in the local newspaper printed in black ink like a second death. Survived by his beloved son, Nolan. That was it. No mention of me. Not a word about the daughter he raised, the woman who had once been his little girl. It was like I had never existed. I stood there in the kitchen with my 13-year-old son, Eli, at my side, the newspaper crinkling in my shaking hands. My face burned. I didn't cry. Not then. I was too numb to cry. Eli looked up from his cereal and studied me. He has my eyes, hazel with flecks of green, but there's something deeper in him, something watchful. He tilted his head, cautious. "What's wrong, Mom?" I wanted to protect him from the answer. I wanted to say it was nothing, but he's too smart for that. Always has been. "Your grandpa's obituary came out this morning," I said, setting the paper down. "They left me out completely." He leaned forward, frowning. "On purpose?" I nodded. It wasn't a mistake. Silence hung in the room like fog. That was the moment I realized how invisible I had become. Not just to my father in death, but to the entire family, to the narrative they were writing without me. I was the one who left, the daughter who didn't follow the rules, the one who spoke out, pushed back, married someone my father called a waste of time, then divorced him, raising a son alone. And now I was the daughter they erased. The memorial was 2 days away. Nolan was organizing it. Of course he was. He always had the spotlight in our family. He was charming, clean-cut, reliable, the son our father adored. The house we grew up in. He inherited it. The business. Signed over. Even the dog was Nolan's favorite. It had always been that way. I wasn't invited to help plan the service, but I was expected to show up and smile politely. I looked at Eli again, thinking of how many times I had told him that blood didn't always define family, that love did. But even I had a hard time believing it that morning. I started gathering my things for work, brushing crumbs off my jacket when Eli stepped into the hallway. He paused and called over his shoulder, "Mom, can I show you something?" He came back with a small wooden box in his hands. It looked handmade, aged pine, a simple clasp, no ornamentation. I recognized it immediately. It was my father's. He used to keep cufflinks in it when I was little. My heart skipped. "Where did you get that?" "Grandpa gave it to me, months ago, secretly. He told me. He said one day they'll try to erase your mother. If that ever happens, open this. Play what's inside." I stared at him. My throat went dry. "Why didn't you tell me this before?" I didn't know what it meant. Not until now. He opened the box carefully, reverently. Inside was a flash drive. Plain, unlabeled. Suddenly I couldn't breathe. It felt like grief and fear and confusion had all wrapped around my chest like vines. "You think it's a message?" I whispered. "I think it's for you," he said. For a long time, I couldn't move, just stared at the little box and the quiet fire in my son's eyes. I saw it then, what my father may have seen, maybe too late. Strength, loyalty. The truth he never spoke, now resting in the hands of a boy who carried more dignity in his voice than most grown men. The day of the memorial arrived fast. The church was full of friends, cousins, old neighbors. Nolan stood at the podium, giving a perfect eulogy. He called our father a rock, a man of wisdom, a devoted father to his only child. I gripped the pew until my knuckles turned white. Eli squeezed my hand. Then, without warning, he stood up, walked to the front. Everyone stared. And when he held up that small wooden box and said, "This is a recording from Grandpa. He asked me to play it if they ever erased Mom," the entire room sat back down. In that second, the silence was louder than anything Nolan had just said. And I knew everything was about to change. The night before the memorial, I couldn't sleep. The apartment was quiet, but my thoughts were louder than ever. Eli had gone to bed hours ago. I could hear the gentle hum of his white noise machine through the thin walls, but it did nothing to quiet my own noise. I sat on the edge of the couch in my robe, staring at the flash drive Eli had handed me earlier that morning. It sat on the coffee table like it had weight, like whatever was inside could crush me or lift me depending on what I found. I hadn't opened it yet. Some part of me was terrified that it might be nothing, or worse, that it might be full of more hurt. My father had never been a man of warm words or easy affection. He was the kind of man who believed in hard work, control, and silence. Especially when it came to me. Growing up in the Karras house was like living in a museum. Our mother, Estelle, died when I was 9. After that, everything got even quieter. Rooms were kept pristine. Voices were kept low. Nolan thrived in that environment. He learned how to be what our father needed: obedient, masculine, calculated. He played sports, joined the family business, never questioned anything. I was the opposite. I asked questions. Too many. I loved books, not ball games. I listened to music in my room, danced barefoot in the hallways. That didn't sit right with my father. He once caught me painting my bedroom wall with my fingers and made me scrub the entire thing with vinegar and steel wool. I was 11. He didn't hit me. That wasn't his style. He just withdrew. He'd look through me like I wasn't there, like I was a noise he had learned to tune out. That was always worse than yelling. By the time I turned 16, I had already started planning my exit. At 18, I left for college on a partial scholarship, and I never looked back. Except I did, constantly. I called, I wrote. I came home for holidays until I realized they didn't feel like home anymore. When I got pregnant with Eli, I told him. My father never responded. I sent him a photo when Eli was born, just in case something in him might soften at the sight of his first grandchild. Instead, Nolan called 2 days later and said, "Dad's not coming around. Don't expect him to." That was the last time I heard Nolan's voice until last week. He left me a voicemail, short and clipped. "Memorial's Saturday. Church is on Willow, 11 a.m. Bring Eli if you want." Not, "How are you?" Not, "I'm sorry he's gone." Just an address. Just instructions. I hadn't even been consulted about the obituary, or the will, or the service. It was all managed by Nolan, the executor of everything, including, it seemed, my erasure. I got up from the couch and walked to Eli's door. I cracked it open, just enough to see him curled up under his blanket, one arm thrown over his head like he used to sleep as a baby. My heart clenched. He deserved better than all this coldness. He deserved family. I stepped inside and sat gently at the foot of his bed. He stirred, one eye opening. "Hey," he whispered, voice raspy with sleep. "You okay?" "Yeah," I lied. Then softer. "I just wanted to say thank you for trusting me with that box." He rubbed his eyes. "You think it means something?" "I don't know, but I think Grandpa knew something, and I think he wanted you to be the one to bring it to light." Eli looked at me for a long time, then nodded. He told me once that he made a lot of mistakes. Maybe this was his way of trying to fix one. I leaned down and kissed his forehead. "Get some sleep. Tomorrow might be a long day." As I stood to leave, he said something that stopped me in my tracks. "You know, he talked about you sometimes. Not like Uncle Nolan did. Different. I think he missed you." I froze in the doorway. That's the thing about grief. It's never just about death. It's about everything that should have been said, every hug that didn't happen, every chance that was swallowed by pride. And as I lay awake that night, I knew, whatever was on that flash drive, it was going to matter. It wouldn't fix the past, but it just might rewrite the story they were trying to tell without me. The memorial was everything my father would have wanted: structured, elegant, restrained. The kind of event where people wear navy suits and pearls, not emotion. Where people speak in half smiles and metaphors instead of tears and honesty. I parked a block away because the lot was full. Figures. The Karras name still carried weight in our town. Even after his death, people lined up to pay their respects to Gerald Karras, the man, the businessman, the community leader. But not the father, not the man I knew. As I walked toward the church, I felt it, like walking into a house where you were no longer welcome. It wasn't just the looks I got from extended family members, it was the absence. My name wasn't in the printed program. I wasn't listed as a surviving child. Even on the welcome table, the photo collage included pictures of my father with Nolan at his graduation, with Nolan at a golf tournament, with Nolan at the ribbon cutting of the office remodel. Not one with me, not one of me and him. Eli walked beside me, quiet but observant. He held the small wooden box tucked under his arm like it was something sacred. I hadn't asked him to bring it, he just did. As we walked inside, someone greeted us, my Aunt Marianne. She blinked like she'd seen a ghost. "Lena? Oh, I didn't realize you were coming." "He was my father," I said. "Yes, of course," she said quickly, her voice cracking before shifting to Eli. "And this must be your son." Eli gave a small nod. She smiled awkwardly and disappeared into the crowd. That was the pattern of the morning. People approached me with hesitation, unsure of how to interact with someone whose very existence had been scrubbed from the narrative. I was the blank space in everyone's memory. Nolan was already at the front of the sanctuary, standing near the pulpit, greeting people like a pastor on Sunday, smiling, nodding, accepting condolences as if he carried the entire family on his back. When he saw me, his smile thinned. He walked over. "Didn't think you'd come," he said. No hug, no warmth. "Why wouldn't I?" I asked, keeping my tone flat. "Well, you were never close with Dad, were you?" There it was, the knife, smooth and quiet. "I was his daughter," I said. "If you're here to make this about you, I'm here to say goodbye." He looked at Eli, then at the box. "What's that?" "Something Dad gave Eli," I said. Nolan raised an eyebrow. "He never mentioned that to me." "Maybe he didn't want to." His jaw tensed. "Don't create drama today, Lena. This is about honoring Dad, not airing grievances." He turned and walked off, a polished politician with no room for guilt. The service began. A choir sang one of my father's favorite hymns, "It Is Well With My Soul." I used to hum that song as a child in my bedroom while drawing. He'd always knock on the wall and tell me to turn it down. There were 3 speakers before Nolan took the podium. His best friend from Rotary Club, a colleague from the bank, and our cousin Jared. Each one praised my father's discipline, his generosity, his loyalty to his family. By the time Nolan stepped up to speak, my heart felt like a clenched fist. He began smoothly, predictably. "My father was a man of principle. He believed in hard work, order, and love of family. He raised me with those values, and I can only hope to pass them on to my children one day." I blinked. "Me?" No mention of me. No we. Then he said it. I was blessed to be his only child. The words echoed through the sanctuary. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. My fingers dug into the cushion of the pew, nails pressing into fabric. I felt Eli shift beside me. Nolan continued talking, but I stopped hearing the words, my ears filled with that old hum, the one I used to hear when my father ignored me across the dinner table. Then Eli leaned over and whispered, "Should I do it now?" I looked at him. His eyes were clear. He wasn't afraid. He was ready. "Are you sure?" I whispered. "Yeah." He said this is when I'd know. Before I could respond, he stood. The room fell into a hush. Eli walked slowly to the front, his sneakers quiet on the carpet. Nolan paused, startled, as my son approached the podium. He held the box high in front of the crowd like a symbol, like proof that something had been hidden. "My name is Eli Karras," he said. "Grandpa gave me this a few months ago. He told me if they ever erased my mom, I should play it." There were gasps, movement. People sat back down. Nolan stepped forward, alarmed. "Eli, what are you doing?" But it was too late. Eli had found his voice, and he was about to use it to tell the truth. Everything stopped when Eli stepped in front of the church with that wooden box in his hands. I could see Nolan freeze at the podium, his eyes narrowing. His jaw tightened like he was biting down hard on a string of words he couldn't say out loud in front of 100 guests. He had been in complete control of this narrative, of Dad's memory, of the inheritance, even the perception of who belonged in the family. Now, with one sentence from my 13-year-old son, it was slipping. "My name is Eli Karras," my son repeated. "Grandpa gave me this box before he passed. He told me, if they ever erase your mother, you'll know what to do." There was a pause, sharp and still, before a rustle spread through the room, the kind of sound a crowd makes when truth is trying to cut through decorum. You could feel the shift. People leaned forward. A few looked around, confused. Others stared straight ahead, hungry for whatever was about to happen. And then Nolan spoke, tight-lipped and calm on the surface, but I knew him well enough to hear the tremor under the polish. "Eli, this really isn't the time." He wanted me to play something. Eli said. "He asked me to wait until someone acted like my mom didn't exist." I stood up. My heart was pounding so hard it was almost audible. "Let him speak," I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it was firm, clear in a way I hadn't felt in years, not since before I left that house. A few people in the pews turned to look at me, some surprised, some curious, some relieved. I could see it in my cousin Jared's face, like something had just been validated. Eli walked over to the tech table near the back of the sanctuary and held out the flash drive to the man controlling the audio. It took only a moment. The man hesitated, but then plugged it in. The screen above the altar, the same one that had shown the slideshow of my father's life minutes earlier, went black, then flickered, and then there he was. My father, Gerald Karras, thin and frail in a hospital bed, wearing a flannel button-down and looking straight into the camera. He looked older than I remembered, softer, not physically, but something in his eyes, something quieter. The room collectively inhaled. He began speaking, his voice low, deliberate. "If you're watching this, I've passed. And if Eli's playing this, then something I feared has happened. I was erased." He looked down for a second, then back up. "My daughter, Lena. I didn't know how to love her. That's the truth. I didn't understand her. I didn't respect her voice. And for that, I've lived with shame I could never say out loud." Gasps, audible murmurs. Even Nolan looked stunned. "Lena," the recording continued, "you were always the strong one. I didn't see that as a strength. I saw it as defiance, and I punished you for it in ways I convinced myself were justified, but they weren't." He paused, breathing heavily. You could hear the oxygen machine somewhere just out of frame. "To anyone listening, if my son, Nolan, has told you that I had only one child, he's wrong. I had two, and the one I ignored. She's the one I admire most." My throat tightened. I could barely keep standing. "I made mistakes," my father said, "but I left something with my lawyer, an updated will. If it's been ignored, let this be my voice making it clear. I want Lena to have the house. I want her to know she mattered." The screen went black. Silence. No one moved. The air was thick with disbelief and revelation. A few people wiped their eyes. Others stared down at the floor, not knowing what to do with what they had just seen. And then Nolan snapped. "That video, he was drugged. He wasn't in his right mind. That's not legal. He didn't know what he was saying." But the room wasn't with him anymore. Not fully. My Aunt Marianne stood up. "That was his voice, Nolan, and he knew exactly what he was saying." I looked at Eli, who was back beside me now. He wasn't shaking. He wasn't nervous. He had done what I hadn't been able to do for decades. He forced my father to speak the truth. In that moment, the power Nolan held unraveled, and for the first time in years, I felt myself coming back into view, not as the forgotten daughter, not as a shadow, but as someone real, seen, heard, remembered. The video ended, and the silence afterward was deafening. It was the kind of silence that doesn't ask for permission. It demands reflection. The kind that presses on your chest because it knows something sacred has just happened. My father's face still burned into the screen before it faded to black. He was gone. But somehow, in the last words he ever recorded, I felt him more present than I ever had when he was alive. I looked around the room. People weren't just shocked. They were rearranging everything they thought they knew. You could see it in their eyes, in the way they shifted in their seats, unsure whether to clap, apologize, or pray. And then came Nolan. He stepped forward again. The weight in the room had shifted. This was no longer his memorial. He couldn't spin this, not after what everyone had just seen. Still, he tried. "That video doesn't change anything," he said, scanning the crowd. "My father was under medication. He didn't know what he was saying. He was confused." He turned to me. "You can't come back into our lives at the 11th hour and rewrite history, Lena. You walked away. You left. You gave up." I felt something rise in my chest. Not rage, not pain. Something quieter, steadier. "I didn't give up," I said, my voice calm. "I left because staying would have erased me long before that obituary did." I stepped forward. "I reached out for years. I tried to mend things. He never met Eli, Not because I didn't want him to, but because he never answered the door. I turned to the crowd. I wasn't talking to Nolan anymore. I was speaking to everyone who had sat there and pretended like I'd never existed. I didn't come here to fight. I came to say goodbye. But my son, our son, he came to tell the truth. And if you can't respect that, then maybe you were never here to honor my father. You were here to protect his image. People shifted. Several heads nodded. An older woman in the back dabbed her eyes. My cousin Jared stood up slowly. "That voice on the video," Jared said, looking around. "That was Uncle Gerald. Clear as day. He meant what he said, and he said it for a reason." Nolan's composure was cracking now. I could see it in his eyes. Panic. Control slipping. His body tight like a spring. Then, almost like it had been rehearsed by the universe, a man in a dark blazer stepped inside the church. He walked briskly down the aisle, holding a thick envelope in his hand. He moved straight toward the podium and looked around. "I'm looking for Lena Karras?" I stepped forward slowly, unsure. "I'm Lena." He nodded and handed me the envelope. "I'm Robert Delane, your father's estate attorney. I just came from the courthouse. We received this video, well, a copy of it, several weeks ago, and with it, a revised will, properly witnessed and notarized. I apologize for the delay. Your father wanted it delivered to the executor after the memorial." He paused, eyes scanning the crowd. "There was a miscommunication, but I'm here now, and I can confirm. It's legal. Gerald Karras left the family home, a personal savings account, and several items of sentimental value to his daughter, Lena Karras." There it was. The truth. Signed, sealed, and legal. A stunned gasp swept through the room. Nolan looked like he had been struck. His mouth opened, but nothing came out. His fists clenched at his sides. "That's not possible. He never said anything to me." "Apparently," the lawyer said with a gentle finality, "he said it where it mattered." I opened the envelope with shaking fingers. Inside was the revised will, my name spelled out clearly, line after line, in my father's handwriting. It wasn't everything, but it was everything I never thought I'd get. It was acknowledgement. It was belonging. It was a man, flawed and late, finally saying, "You matter." I looked down at Eli, who stood beside me like a little soldier who had just changed the course of a war. "You okay, Mom?" he asked softly. I bent down and kissed his forehead. "I think, for the first time in a long time, I actually am." The church was quiet again, but this silence was different. This silence wasn't heavy. It was peaceful. The truth had been spoken. The air had cleared, and the daughter they tried to erase had finally been written back into the story. The next morning, I woke up in my childhood home. For a second, I forgot where I was. The light was coming through the curtains the way it used to when I was a teenager, lying awake and counting the days until I could leave this place behind. But now, the house didn't feel like it was closing in on me. It felt still, different. After the service, I hadn't planned to come here. Honestly, I thought I'd never walk through that door again. But the lawyer handed me the keys, my keys, and Eli looked at me and said, "We should go. Just for a minute." So we came. We walked room by room. The furniture was different, cleaner, colder. Nolan had already started modernizing the place after Dad died, ripping out anything that held warmth or memory. In the living room, Eli stopped beside the old bookshelf, half empty now, and ran his hand along the edge. "You used to read to me here, didn't you?" he asked. "Every time we visited your grandma's grave," I said. "We'd stop here after. You were just a toddler." He smiled. "It feels weird, but not bad. Like the house remembers you." I don't know if that's true, but it felt true. In the days that followed, word spread quickly. People who'd ignored me at the service started calling, some to apologize, some to explain, most to ask questions. I didn't return many of those calls. I wasn't interested in being pitied or reconciled on someone else's timeline. One afternoon, Aunt Marianne stopped by. She brought an old jewelry box, my mother's. She'd kept it after Mom died, said Dad never asked for it. Inside was the silver ring my mother used to wear every Sunday. I slipped it on my finger and felt something click back into place. "He should have given this to you years ago, Aunt Marianne said, her eyes misty. But I think, deep down, he knew you were the only one who deserved it. Nolan didn't speak to me after the memorial, not once. From what I heard, he was furious with the lawyer, furious with the will, and mostly furious that he lost control. But there was nothing he could do. The documents were clear. My father hadn't just said it, he had made it legal. For a man like Nolan, being outmaneuvered by the father he thought he owned must have been unbearable. But I didn't care about the house or the money. It wasn't about that. It was about the truth, spoken, recorded, undeniable. It was about hearing my name, my full name, come out of my father's mouth, not as an afterthought, but as a confession, a tribute, an apology. People say death brings clarity, but I think it only magnifies what was already there. My father didn't suddenly change in those final days. He simply stopped running from what he always knew deep down, that he had wronged his daughter, and that she had never stopped being his child. Eli was the real hero in all of it. He didn't shout. He didn't accuse. He simply stood up and told the truth, with the kind of courage most adults never learn. A few weeks later, we sat in the backyard. The grass was overgrown and the flower beds were empty, but the sky was wide open. Eli looked up at me and said, "Do you think he was proud of me?" "I know he was," I said. "And if he could tell you now, I think he'd say, thank you for doing what he couldn't." He nodded, quietly proud. Then he asked something else. "Are you going to stay here?" I looked at the house, the porch I used to sit on during summer nights, the hallway where I once yelled that I'd never come back, the creaky step at the top of the stairs that still groaned under my foot the same way it always did. "I think I will. For a little while," I said. "I don't want to run from it anymore. I want to make it mine." And maybe that's what healing is. Not pretending the past didn't happen, not pretending it didn't hurt, but choosing to move forward with eyes open, shoulders back, heart intact. I had spent years thinking I was forgotten, unloved, rejected. But in the end, I wasn't erased. I was remembered by a father who couldn't say it in life, and by a son who made sure I was never silenced in death. So to anyone who's ever been cut out of the story, just know this. Sometimes the truth doesn't arrive when you want it to, but when it does, it speaks louder than 1,000 lies. And sometimes all it takes is one voice, clear, young, and brave, to carry it. If this story moved you even just a little, take a second to like the video. It helps more than you know. And if you've ever felt like the forgotten one in your family, or like your voice didn't matter, I want you to know you're not alone. Leave a comment and share your story below. I read every one of them, and I'd love to hear yours. Share this video with someone who needs a reminder that truth always finds a way. And if you want more real stories, raw, honest, and unfiltered, make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit that bell icon so you never miss the next one. Thanks for watching, and remember, your story matters, even when others try to erase it.